Today we will start our decision structures. The first of 4 of our examples will work with the if statement. With an if statement, you must have a condition that will give you a true or false. The condition uses relative operators: less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, not equal to, and equal to. When you're working with the if condition, you must state if, and then on the left-hand side of your operator, it must be only one value or anything that will produce one value. Exactly the same on the right, one value or any code that will produce one value. Let's look at our example program. Our program is one that allows a user to type in 3 test scores, compute the average, and from that average determine the appropriate grade. Since we're doing input, you have to be able to import the scanner. Once you import the scanner, you must create the scanner utilizing an object name that the programmer creates. Utilizing that scanner object name, you can then apply it with a period, next, and then the data type that you're wanting to input. You then assign that to the appropriate variable. Remember, the variable must be declared before you can use it. Once we have the average, we're going to determine utilizing a basic if structure. The if structure starts out if, then your parenthesis, and now we must utilize a value, a relative operator, and then the code that will produce a value again. We're trying to see if the average, and on this one, if your average is greater than 95, then we're going to tell you good work. So average greater than 95. Since this line needs the next line in order to execute, make sure you put no semicolon at the end of your parenthesis. Also, since the next line belongs to your condition, make sure you indent. We can then system.out.print line to display to the screen, and in between the quotes what we want to display. Good work. And then the semicolon to end it. Now whenever we execute this, it will test the condition, give me a true, and display on the screen good work. Now if we want to take this one step further and tell it that if the average is not greater than 95, or yes, it's not greater than 95, then tell it try harder, we can add the false part of our if statement. Below your if, type the word else. Again, it needs the next line to execute, therefore, no semicolon until we're done. Now we're going to display to the user by copying and pasting and changing the lettering. Try harder. Now, this condition will execute and compare average to 95. If it's true, it will execute the true statements. If it is false, it will execute the false statements. If I have more than one line that belongs to the condition in the true area, I must make sure and block them or scope utilizing curly braces around all of the different lines that belong in the true. It is the same with the false. If multiple lines are needed, you simply block them with curly braces. Even though I don't need them right now because I only have one line in the true and false, the curly braces will not hurt them. Now, if we were going to follow a standard scoring system, the student would receive a grade of A, B, C, D, or F. Since we have one variable in our condition, and we can have multiple outcomes by the comparison, we need to utilize a different structure. This is called an if-else chain. It allows the programmer to compare the variable against different outcomes. Once one of the conditions are true, then it will ignore all other conditions. It still starts out with an if, the code that produces one value, your relative operator. This time we're going to say greater than or equal to 90. If this is true, then the student gets an A. If this is not true, it falls down to the false part. But we have to then compare to see if the average is greater than or equal to our next level, which is 80. If that is true, then the student will get a B, and it will ignore all the rest of the code. It will continue down this ladder until it hits a default else. If none of the above are true, then we simply have an else, and the student receives an F. Make sure when you are in your if-else chain, your else cannot just have a condition right after it. It must have the word if in front of it. If there are multiple lines of code in any of the true-false areas, just make sure you curly brace them. You don't have to have any curly braces in here, but it doesn't hurt if you do. Let's now see that if we add another condition, let's say that if the student misses 2 labs or less, then they will receive the standard scoring. If the student misses any more than 2 labs, then they will reserve a different score. In order to do that, we still have our standard score, but we don't want our program to even execute that code if the student has missed more than 2 labs. So we have to write a condition that will prove that. If. On this one, now realize since I am adding a new variable called labs missed, I must go down and create that variable by declaring it and utilizing our camel case for variables and assign it a starting value. Now that I have a variable that is declared, I need to fill it with content before I can use it. So, once we ask the last score, we must then do a prompt and an input for our labs missed. So once we paste that code in, we're going to tell the user to enter number of labs missed and put a space so my number will not show up right next to my prompt. Since this is an integer value, make sure that after the word next, we tell it what data type we are getting. We then make sure we have our scanner object name, and we're assigning this to our labs missed. Now I can use this. So, if my labs missed is less than 3, then we're going to allow the standard scoring. However, if this is not true, we need to come down and have an else with our primary if. Here, we're saying if that is not true, they've missed 3 or more labs, then the student has to make 95 or above to get an A. Else, if it's greater than or equal to 85, they get a B. Else, if it's greater than or equal to 75, they get a C all the way to the F. So, if our primary decision of labs missed does not produce a true, it will fall to my else. It assumes that if the labs missed is less than 3 is not true, then my else automatically assumes that the labs missed is greater than or equal to 3. I do not have to repeat that condition. It will then fall to the nested if-else chain. So we have a primary and a secondary. Next, we'll be discussing all the rules and the details that we must employ whenever formulating any of our if structures for a decision.